An independent editorial analysis of Japan's defense posture and security policy.
The synchronized dismantling of the Type 74 main battle tank fleet in the scrap yards of Hokkaido presents a stark industrial contrast to the operational resurgence of its peers currently deployed in Eastern Europe. While the Leopard 1 enjoys a strategic second life through coalition's transfers to Ukraine, the Japanese Type 74 faces the irreversible finality of the cutting torch. This divergence in destiny is not merely a consequence of geographical distance or a lack of political will. Rather, it stems from a fundamental systemic disconnect between Japan's Cold War-era defense planning and the rigorous requirements of modern coalition logistics. The scrapping of these assets, instead of their conversion into diplomatic capital, through the official security assistance framework, now illustrates the heavy price of the Galapagos syndrome in defense engineering. Domestic optimization has inadvertently created international isolation. At the technical level, the operational dead end of the Type 74 is rooted in the very feature that once defined it as a masterpiece of indigenous engineering: the active hydropneumatic suspension. Designed specifically for the compartmentalized, mountainous terrain of the Japanese archipelago, this complex system allowed the tank to tilt its hull and engage targets from concealed positions that Western tanks could not utilize. From a purely tactical perspective, within a defensive war scenario on Honshu, this was an optimal engineering solution. However, from a strategic logistics standpoint in the 2000s, it created a platform with near-zero interoperability. The system involves over 2,000 specific hydraulic components and high-pressure lines that require specialized maintenance infrastructure found only within the logistical depots of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. Transferring such a system to a partner nation would not constitute aid. It would be a logistical burden. Maintaining the hydraulic integrity of aging vehicles requires a level of technical depth and supply chain consistency that is difficult to sustain outside the Japanese domestic ecosystem. This technical isolation is compounded by the industrial rigidity of the production model employed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Unlike the Leopard 1, which was supported by a multinational consortium, the Type 74 was a single client product. Once production ceased in 1989, the supply chain began to contract immediately. In the case of the Leopard 1, a global user base incentivized companies to maintain tooling and refurbishment capabilities for decades. Conversely, the absence of an export market for the Type 74 meant that no business case existed to keep legacy parts in production. Consequently, revitalizing the fleet now would require the remanufacturing of obsolete components at unit costs that likely exceed the price of procuring new, modern wheeled vehicles. This economic reality renders the Type 74 financially toxic as a diplomatic asset. Beyond the hardware, the retirement of the Type 74 is also driven by a critical, often overlooked variable in Japan's defense equation: demographics. The Type 74 operates with a 4-person crew, necessitating a human loader. In contrast, modern tanks utilize automatic loaders, reducing the crew requirement to 3 personnel. In an environment where the self-defense forces consistently struggle to meet recruitment targets due to an aging population, the manpower intensity of the Type 74 becomes a strategic liability. Maintaining a reserve fleet of several hundred tanks would effectively lock down over 1,000 trained tankers who are urgently needed to crew modern platforms or to staff emerging domains such as cyber and space warfare. The decision to scrap the Type 74 is therefore not just a hardware update, it is a necessary rationalization of human capital. The decision also reflects a decisive doctrinal shift. The force is moving away from heavy static defense toward rapid mobile deployment and island denial. The strategic pivot to the Nansei Islands requires assets that are air transportable and capable of self-deployment over the road networks of smaller islands. The Type 74, weighing 38 tons, offers poor strategic mobility compared to the Type 16 maneuver combat vehicle. Maintaining a reserve of tracked tanks implies a commitment to a static, mainland invasion scenario that defense planners no longer prioritize as the primary threat vector. Resource allocation for these aging platforms competes directly with the funding needed for drone warfare capabilities and standoff missile defense systems. Furthermore, the trajectory of the Type 74 stands in sharp contrast to the defense export strategy observed in South Korea. Seoul has effectively utilized its legacy fleets as bridge capabilities to offering them to potential buyers to secure market entry. This cascading transfer model effectively monetizes older assets and strengthens alliance interdependence. Japan, restricted by the three principles on transfer of defense equipment and technology for decades, lacks the institutional muscle memory to execute such transfers. By the time policy restrictions were relaxed, the hardware had already degraded past the point of viable rehabilitation. The inability to pivot the Type 74 into a secondary role highlights a lack of foresight in lifecycle management, where the end-of-service plan was limited to disposal rather than value recapture. The retirement of the Type 74 therefore serves as a critical case study for the future of the Type 10 main battle tank and the Global Combat Air Program. It demonstrates that technological superiority in a specific local context does not equate to strategic value if that technology is severed from global supply chains. The unique features that made the Type 74 formidable in the 1980s became the very factors that rendered it structurally obsolete in the interconnected security environment of the 2020s. As Japan integrates deeper into collective security frameworks, the legacy of the Type 74 suggests that future procurement decisions must weigh the benefits of bespoke performance against the imperative of standardization. The operational value of a weapon system is no longer defined solely by ballistics and armor. It is defined by the resilience and openness of the industrial base that supports it. Ultimately, the Type 74's demise signals the end of an era of isolationist defense capability. It forces a reckoning with the reality that in the modern era, logistics remains the dominant variable in the calculus of deterrence.